The diplomatic chamber aboard the Sovereign's Pride had seen countless negotiations, territorial disputes, and trade agreements over its 3 centuries of service. But never in all that time had it witnessed something quite like this. Celine Kale stood with her arms crossed, her weathered flight jacket bearing the faded insignia of Earth's Expeditionary Corps. Her dark eyes remained calm, almost bored, as Ambassador Threxaval of the Corvian hegemony loomed over her, his 4 arms gesticulating wildly. "You hairless apes think you can just waltz into contested space and claim salvage rights?" Threxaval's voice boomed through the chamber, his chitinous exoskeleton rattling with rage. "Your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. We have dominated these sectors for millennia." Celine simply raised an eyebrow. She'd heard variations of this speech a dozen times before from a dozen different species. The galaxy, it seemed, didn't take kindly to humanity's rapid expansion. What she hadn't expected were the 2 small observers in the corner. Nira and Varric, the Fellerin cubs assigned as cultural liaison apprentices, sat perched on their cushioned observation platform. Their large, luminous eyes tracked the ambassador's every movement, their tufted ears swiveling to catch each decibel of his rage. They looked like terrestrial cats might have looked if evolution had granted them sapience, bipedal locomotion, and an unsettling level of technological prowess. Nira's tail twitched. She leaned toward her brother, her whiskers quivering slightly. "Varric," she whispered in their melodic language, which the translation matrix rendered into perfect galactic standard, "the large one is very loud." "Very loud," Varric agreed, his head tilting at that peculiar feline angle that suggested deep contemplation. "Should we remove the loud part?" Threxaval was still ranting. "And furthermore, your primitive warships dare to—" Celine's eyes flicked to the cubs. She'd worked with Fellerins before. Lovely people, curious, brilliant, and utterly terrifying when provoked. Their species had a reputation for solving problems with surgical precision. The phrase, "remove the loud part," could mean anything from suggesting a mute button to, well, literal surgical intervention. "Cubs," Celine said gently, her voice cutting through Threxaval's tirade with surprising ease. "That won't be necessary. The ambassador is just expressing his concerns enthusiastically." Threxaval whirled on her. "Do not interrupt me, human. I am—" "Loud," Nira observed again, her head tilting to the other side now. She pulled out a small data pad, her delicate paws navigating the holographic interface with practiced ease. "Varric, I am reading his vocal output at approximately 115 decibels. This exceeds diplomatic protocol recommendations by 47%. 47% is significant," Varric noted, his own datapad appearing from somewhere in his decorative sash. "Perhaps we should consult the medical database. Excessive volume often indicates distress in mammalian species. There may be inflammation in his thoracic resonance chambers, or parasitic infection affecting behavioral regulation," Nira suggested helpfully. Threxaval's rage sputtered like a dying engine. "What? What are you talking about?" "Your loudness," both cubs said in unison, their synchronized response somehow more unnerving than reassuring. "We wish to help." Celine pressed her lips together to suppress a smile. She'd read the Fellerin medical journals. Their species had developed healing techniques so advanced they bordered on miraculous. They'd also developed a somewhat literal approach to problem solving. If something was broken, they fixed it. If something was too loud, they made it quiet. Simple, efficient, occasionally horrifying to species unfamiliar with their methods. "I am not sick," Threxaval bellowed, though his volume had noticeably decreased. "I am expressing legitimate grievances against your species." Nira's ears flattened slightly. She tapped her datapad. "Varric, he is loud again. I think we should definitely remove the loud part. For his own health, of course." "Of course," Varric agreed. "It would be negligent to allow him to continue damaging his vocal structures. Mother says we must always help those in distress." "Distress? I am the ambassador of the Corvian." "Ambassador," Celine interjected, her voice still maddeningly calm. "I strongly suggest you lower your volume. The Fellerin cubs are genuinely trying to help you. And trust me, you don't want their help." Threxaval stared at her, then at the 2 small felines who had now stood up on their platform, medical scanners appearing in their paws with the speed of conjurers producing rabbits. "We can perform the procedure here," Nira said brightly. "It will only take a few moments. First, we induce localized paralysis in the vocal membranes. Then we recalibrate the resonance frequency to a more optimal range," Varric continued. "Approximately 65 decibels for comfortable conversation. You will still be able to speak, just more quietly." "This is insane." But Threxaval's voice had dropped to almost conversational levels. "Much better," Nira chirped. "See, Varric? He is healing already. Humans must have natural therapeutic properties." Celine finally allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, we're very soothing." Threxaval looked between the human and the cubs, his mandibles working silently. The fury that had animated him moments before had evaporated, replaced by a dawning realization that he'd somehow lost control of the entire situation. "The salvage rights," Celine said, her voice gentle but firm. "Humanity found the derelict in unclaimed space. Galactic law is clear on this matter. We're not trying to dominate anything, Ambassador. We're just following the same rules everyone else does. But your expansion, your aggressive colonization—" "We settled 43 uninhabited systems," Celine corrected. "Not a single one was claimed by any recognized government. We ran the surveys, we followed protocol." She paused. "And we've offered technology exchanges, cultural programs, and trade agreements to every species we've encountered, including yours." Threxaval deflated, his exoskeleton seeming to sag. The Hegemony Council instructed me to lodge a formal protest." "Consider it logged," Celine said. "But maybe next time, try it at a reasonable volume. For your health." Nira and Varric had approached now, circling the ambassador with professional interest. Their scanners hummed softly. "His stress hormones are decreasing," Nira observed. "The human's presence appears to have a calming effect." "Fascinating," Varric murmured. "Mother was right. Humans do have unusual properties. They make loud things quiet without surgery." "It's called diplomacy," Celine offered. "Diplomacy," Nira repeated, tasting the word. "Is this a human medical technique?" "Something like that." Threxaval cleared his throat quietly. Perhaps we were hasty in our assessment of humanity's intentions." "Perhaps," Celine agreed. As the ambassador departed, his posture considerably less aggressive than when he'd arrived, the cubs scampered over to Celine. They looked up at her with those impossibly large eyes. "Celine Kale," Nira said formally, "you have taught us a valuable lesson today." "Oh?" Celine crouched down to their level. "What's that?" "Sometimes," Varric said, his tail swishing thoughtfully, "you do not need to remove the loud part. Sometimes you just need to wait for them to realize they are being loud." "And that humans are very good at waiting," Nira added. "Your species has much patience." Celine laughed. "We've had to develop it. The galaxy's a noisy place." "But you make it quieter," both cubs said together. As Celine left the diplomatic chamber, she could hear the cubs behind her, already drafting their report to the Felleran matriarchs. She caught fragments. "Remarkable therapeutic capabilities, non-invasive behavioral modification, recommend further study of human diplomatic techniques." She smiled. The galaxy thought humanity's strength was in its warships, its technology, or its stubborn refusal to quit. But maybe, just maybe, their real strength was simpler than that. They knew when to yell, and more importantly, they knew when to let others yell themselves out. And apparently that was enough to terrify even the most aggressive species into submission, especially when the alternative was two well-meaning Felleran cubs offering to remove the loud part. Humanity didn't always need to be the strongest species in the galaxy. Sometimes they just needed to be the most patient and the most diplomatically creative about avoiding unnecessary surgery. The cubs' voices echoed down the corridor. "Next time we should bring the sedation apparatus, just in case." Celine shook her head, still smiling. "Yep. Most patient species in the galaxy. They had to be."